I'm speaking with David Matley, selected to the California State Speech Hall of Fame in 2012. And we're just going to chat a while. Tell us about your early days. David, where'd you go to school? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school?
Well, I was born in Berkeley, but grew up in Stockton, California.
Oh, okay.
And so went to school, Catholic schools in Stockton.
St. Mary's?
St. Mary's High School, St. Luke's Elementary School. In fact, I remember my first year at the state tournament, ran into John Cardoza, surprising enough. And John was one of my teachers at St. Mary's High School in Stockton.
Were you in speech?
First thing he asked me is why I never did speech and debate with him. And it's funny because the class I took with John was religion, ethics, and morality. He wasn't, when I was there and taking the class, it was probably like 1978, we had a Mr. Moraga.
Oh, I remember him, yes.
Remember him? Yeah.
That was before John then.
Yeah, he taught English and he taught speech and debate. And I actually did. I took a speech class with Mr. Moraga. And I enjoyed the class. I remember giving a speech in there and having posters and everything. And he encouraged me, but I didn't have the time. I did some sports. I did drama for 2 or 3 years. And it just, you know, I just never really had the inkling or the desire, although I did have friends senior year who talked about going to debate tournaments. But it just wasn't a big thing at the school at the time, and just never really thought about it. Never thought about speech and debate as an activity at all until I was student teaching at Washington High School.
Okay.
And at Washington High School, I was walking to an English class that I was doing for my student teaching, and Sanford Chandler came out of his portable and said, "Hey, young man, feller, come over here." And he had a speech class, and so he asked me if I had speech experience, and I told him, well, I was voted best speaker in my college public speaking class. And so I told him I was voted best speaker in my public speaking class, and he's like, "Perfect, come on in, you're super qualified." And I ended up taking it on, his speech and debate class, as a 3rd-hour assignment. Went to a couple of tournaments, got to know the kids, got to coaching a little bit, and it was really my first experience with the whole activity of forensics.
And that was about when, you said?
Good question. So I got hired in '89 at Monte Vista. I would say that was probably 1988.
Okay, and was Monte Vista your first and only teaching assignment?
Yeah, my only interview and my only job as a teacher, really. So it's just kind of, you know, weird how those things work out. So my first experience, I remember I went to a tournament judging for Chandler, and it was a UOP Invitational. And the first round that I ever remember judging, my really first experience with speech and debate, was a dramatic interpretation round. And the kid, one of the kids in the room was just absolutely marvelous. He was doing the Mozart piece. I can't remember the name of the Amadeus.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, between him and a couple other kids in the round, I just thought to myself, that is just absolutely amazing. You know, the quality of the acting, the use of voice, and all of that. It was really a moving experience for me, and it sort of opened my mind to what speech and debate could be. Because honestly, I had no idea that any of this stuff had ever existed before I went and judged a tournament for Chandler. So I really liked it. I enjoyed the activity and all that sort of thing. Never ever thought at the time, you know, this is something I'm going to be doing as a career, whatever. You know, I was in graduate school, you know, studying English, literature, all that sort of thing. And I was pretty much convinced that, you know, I was going to teach English for a couple of years, you know, save up some money and, you know, finish, go off, get a PhD, all that sort of thing. And just, you know, one thing leads to another, and here I am. But just a quick little thing as far as how I ended up at Monte Vista.
Yeah.
So I did this judging for Chandler. I took on the 3rd hour. And the reason I did is because nobody was getting hired to teach back then. Okay, this was the late 80s. I think there were 60 people at San Francisco State going through the credential program. And towards the end of the year, people were doing interviews. Nobody that I knew of at the end of the year got hired in the Bay Area. There were people going down to Fresno, people going out of state, whatever. But anyway, there was no jobs available. And so I figured if I did the third hour thing, it would, give me a little leg up on other people. And so anyway, I'm calling around since people are getting interviews and stuff here. It's like, April, May, something like that. And so there was this opening for a speech and debate coach in, our district, San Ramon Valley Unified. So Sanford Chandler says, you got to call, you got to find out what's going on. He kept bugging me, did you call? And so I said, yeah, okay, I'll call. And so I called from his office in the back of the room. And it turns out that it was San Ramon High School that had an opening for a coach, but it was an assistant coach. And he said, you might want to check Monte Vista because I hear they're having trouble with their coach and they might need a coach. And so I said, all right. So I called Monte Vista and spoke with the principal, because what I did, that original application was to do everything through the district office, right? And so Chandler says, call the principal. So I called the principal, and he said that he's not sure they may be hiring a speech and debate coach, but to check back, because they had one at the time, something like that. And so anyway, I did, and I hung up and that sort of thing. How did it go? I said, well, I talked to the principal, Bob Giannini. It turns out he even went to Washington High School. And so Chandler got a big kick out of that. He's all, give me that number. And so he calls him right back, right? And he gives the whole story, right, about the experience with me and, how he'd be passing up this amazing teacher and coach if they didn't hire me and that sort of thing. And here I'm sitting there all embarrassed thinking, what are you doing? Come on. The guy said he's not even sure if there's an opening. This is just for a coach, not necessarily for a teacher. The conversation ended and Chandler got alumni donations since Bob Giannini had graduated from Washington High School and actually got an interview. And so he told me that I can go down the next day and I can go talk to the principal because he wanted to meet me at that point. And so anyway, I talked to him and he said he could probably give me a section or two, but certainly not 5 sections full time. So I held out and I told him I really don't want anything part-time, And so as it worked out, by the end of the summer, I kept bugging him and they ended up finding 5 sections for me. I taught drama, I taught speech and debate, I taught English. I had, I think, 5 different preps. But at the time, I didn't care. I was young and, willing to work.
And those were some hard times for young guys coming out to get a teaching job. I mean, they just weren't there. I was lucky in my era because they wanted them all over the place.
Right. And it works in cycles too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
By the mid-90s, the late 90s, a lot of the people who were originally hired in the 60s and early 70s, they're all retiring.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this influx. Geez, we're hiring for 5 or 10 years, so we had like 20, 25 new teachers a year. And the year I got hired, it was me and like 1 or 2 other people. Yeah. That was it.
Times keep a-changing. Hey, during all these years at Monte Vista and your teaching career up to this point being 2014, September, what offices have you held? Beyond the classroom, what have you been involved in speech organization?
Congress director was the first thing that
was
I did.
Within your league?
Within the league. I did district chair. I started coming to CHSSA meetings late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. It was sort of a favor, because we needed someone to represent the league. Was in the Congress committee, had a good time doing it, and ended up becoming chair of the Congress committee. Really enjoyed it, enjoyed all the people I worked with. But that's basically it. Never did league president simply because it's just too much. It's too much responsibility and all of that. And Monte Vista, it's always been a lot of kids, and it's tough. You're raising a family, you have a lot of students, a fairly big squad. You got to be careful getting involved in too many things. So I always participated, leadership-wise in the league, through Congress, and then district chair for a few years.
Tell me this, of all these students that you've had, many of them have done so well, what 1 or 2 stand out as being your very best?
God, that's such a tough question.
I know it is. That's why I like to ask it.
People ask me that, students love to ask that question.
I know.
And it's difficult. Even if they just ask me, who was your best debater?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, you have to qualify it a little bit, right? Because whoever was the smartest debater, the best analytical mind, the person who I felt really understood debate, or in this case, Lincoln Douglas debate the best, maybe didn't win the most, that sort of thing. But I mean, I would have to say, my first national champion, the 2000 national champion Lincoln Douglas, Adam Price, certainly is up there among, one of our best debaters. Simply because he was able to understand and also be extremely analytical and persuasive. But yet, I had another student who was much more successful, say, in a national circuit type style, although he was a very traditional debater, Will Leiter. No question about it, Will is probably one of the smartest debaters. Here's a kid I could send to national tournaments and go quarterfinals, semifinals, or finals. He was well respected across the country as one of the top debaters for his junior year, but he didn't have the same success at nationals that Adam had, or state, because there was some element of persuasion that he didn't quite. And the most recent national champion I had, Gabe Bronstein, again, not a whole lot of national circuit sort of experience and respect around the country, but hands down, probably the most persuasive debater I had. And he was the only debater that I've had, and there's very few of them out there who won both the state of California in Lincoln Douglas and nationals in Lincoln Douglas.
What a rarity.
And this is a kid who did not start debating in Lincoln Douglas till he was a sophomore. But he won from the opening gate. So immediately at league tournaments he won in varsity, he won in invitationals. It was hard to beat this kid, and it was hard to put your finger on what he was doing.
Was he a real communicative type of kid that got across to everybody?
I would say what separated him from, say, maybe Adam and Will and all the other debaters that I've had is his ability to read the judge. Mm-hmm. To be able to figure out what it takes to convince this person or this group of people in this room to win the round. Because it comes down to those rebuttal speeches, what you say in the end, what you pick out are the most important issues. And this kid, Gabe, had that knack of finding those specific points to be able to win the rounds. Whatever he did, I mean, the kid was absolutely amazing at being able to do that. That was just my Lincoln Douglas debaters, right? And so see how hard it is if somebody asks me, who was your best, right? I have one kid who, hands down, everybody across the country thought was like one of the best debaters in the country. And then two kids who won nationals. But each of the three had, different attributes. Different attributes.
And there are more, I'm sure. These kids that were big successes, or maybe not such big tournament successes, what about their successes in life? What have some of them done beyond?
That's a good question, and I feel terrible because I don't do Facebook, and so I'm not good at keeping track of
where they are,
and what they're doing, right? But I can tell you that they're former debaters are doctors now.
Sure, yeah.
Right? One's a professor at Harvard University. There was a parent in our league who I guess writes for Forbes magazine. And so this was last year. He had written an article talking about league tournaments and that sort of thing, and got all excited because his son was doing it, and talking about how wonderful the activity is and all of that. And he had mentioned some people, there were coaches around the league, and my name got mentioned. And so I get an email the next day. You probably don't remember me, but I was a student you had in the late 90s, and I just read that you were doing speech and debate still, and I wanted to say hi. Well, I mean, it just so happened to be.
My question would be, did you remember him?
Absolutely. Yeah, her and her sister.
Oh, her, okay.
Yeah, and so they were two of my favorite students from the past, Priyal and Meghna Subramanian. Absolutely charming, charismatic girls. One of my best extempors in the past. Both of them were absolutely amazing. And so, of course, I remembered them.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah.
Well, while we're teasing memory, how about state and national tournaments? Any one or two in particular stand out to you for success results? You've already mentioned your national champions, or anything special about those kind of tournaments?
I mean, Portland, Oregon, #1, first national champion.
Yeah.
Adam Price. We had a great time. It's a beautiful city. You know, stayed at the Embassy Suites. Everything about the tournament was nice, and you know, capping it off by having Adam win was absolutely spectacular. I'll never forget the year 2000, the millennium, right? Portland, Oregon. So #1. But another one that I really, really, really will never forget, and I hold dear, Fargo, North Dakota.
I hold that one dear too, but for more reasons.
That tournament, it rained like nothing, right? It was my first national tournament, and my kids did great. You had a girl in Lincoln Douglas debate, went to quarterfinals. She thought she was out. She didn't see her name when they were doing the postings falling down. And so I remember she had taken off her ribbon, wrinkled it up and threw away. And so we both sort of crossed paths like right after the postings. And so I asked her, I said, you ready for your round? So she says, my name wasn't on, my code wasn't up there. I said, what do you mean your code wasn't up there? I just saw it. So we went back and looked, and sure enough, her code was up there. I said, you better go get your ribbon. She goes into her round, right? And this is like the top 12 at that point. She goes into her round. She put her ribbon back on there. It was all wrinkled up. Yeah. And so I had her. I had another girl in oratory, Natasha Wilson, and she was in quarterfinals. And so this is my first year, first time going to nationals. I had 2 kids, tremendous success. We stayed in a Motel 6, right? Because I'm trying to save as much money as I can, to be able to afford to, take these kids. It was like, my second or third year at Monte Vista. And so, yeah, I mean, that one, I still have the T-shirt. And I've never worn this T-shirt, right? But it's the Nationals from Fargo, North Dakota. And I have the thing put away.
Yeah.
And so it's very sentimental Nationals tournament for me, no doubt.
In building this career of yours, certainly you've had some special assistants, mentors across the way. Who stands out to you? Where did you get your help?
Good question. I mean, that's when like I said, my experience in speech and debate was nil. Okay, so I came into the job at Monte Vista needing to learn. And my only experience at that point was, being a judge really more than an assistant coach at Washington High School, and working with, at that point, a very remedial public speaking class, and then a couple of kids outside class who would give extemp speeches to me and that sort of thing. So when I came into Monte Vista, I really needed somebody to sort of work with, okay? And so one assistant coach that I'll always remember, Brian Householder, he was one of the students at Washington High School. And so when I came over to Monte Vista, he had graduated Washington, and I told him, I need you to come out and work with me. And so for my first 3 years, I guess, Brian Householder was assistant coach for me, and he's the one that really helped, show me the ropes, and someone who had experience that could give me advice and that sort of thing as we were forming things. So Brian was definitely very fundamental in, my learning the activity, getting things going.
Okay. Now you get to be an ego here. Want to know what you think your greatest contribution to the world of speech?
That's an easy question, actually. I think
I could guess it for you, but go ahead.
All right. I think my greatest contribution is simply the number of students that I've had the opportunity to introduce public speaking to. I tell parents when we have our back to school night, it's not normally the students who sort of won nationals or won state are my best kids that contact me later on. Some of course do. The people who contact me the most are those students that I don't even remember. They took speech and debate for a year. They took the class. They didn't go to tournaments, but they told me how it changed their life and how if they hadn't taken that class, they wouldn't have done this or that, and they will always remember that. And so I just think the ability to work with so many kids, both in the class, that come to our summer camps in the summer, that are able to get over that fear of public speaking, to that confidence to be able to stand up and speak in front of a group and to take on a leadership role in life, okay, that maybe they wouldn't have done had they not taken speech and debate. That, I feel, is my greatest contribution, and that's something that I'm very proud of. I really, really enjoy working with young kids. And there's something about speech and debate that anybody who does the activity or coaches it understands. It's a very empowering activity. It empowers kids. And so to have any part in, empowering kids to make them feel better about themselves and a little bit more confident, I think is something to be very proud of.
Absolutely, amen. I'm in full agreement there. If you could change something in speech education or speech competition in California, what would you like to change?
Wow, that's a good question. I can tell you some things where I feel that, there are problems there, but coming up with a solution is the hard part. All right, I'll give you a couple of examples, okay? Number one, I think that whenever you're looking at sort of problems that need to get addressed in speech competition, it comes down to judging. Because judging in so many ways is so hard. It can be so biased. It can be so difficult for students who put in so much work in an activity, and they're in a very crucial round. And here you have judges that are not paying attention. Maybe they've fallen asleep. Maybe they know the person that you're competing against. Maybe there's something. And so in those situations, it can be a very heartbreaking activity for a kid, because we don't vet the judges sometimes as well as I think we could. But how we fix that is difficult, because I'm not of the belief that you need specialized judges for an activity. Okay? That if you can convince somebody who is rational, intelligent, right, fairly mature, that who will listen to you, right, that's fine. That's all you really should have to have, right? But I think that the judging is the one that gets me the most. Some of the events, I think HI maybe has gotten a little bit too cartoony and gimmicky, that I would prefer, but I'm not really one for legislating too much how somebody should be performing an activity,
What was your favorite event, or what is your favorite event to coach?
You're so funny, bro, because you're asking me questions that the kids love to ask.
Okay.
Right, Mr. Matley, what's your favorite event? Or what they'll say is, his favorite event is Congress. That's so obvious. Right?
Maybe not.
Absolutely, right?
Of course.
And so, honestly, it's really, really tough, okay? But if there was one event, let's say I'm retired, and they say, all right, we just want you to coach part-time, you can help out our squad, right? But we only want you to choose one event. The event that I would choose is extemp. And it's a very, very simple reason for it. Okay, besides the fact that I think it's a very important event because you learn one of the most difficult ways of speaking, and that's extemporaneous, which we know is the one you're most commonly going to have to speak in. Okay. Number two, you will learn probably the most because you will be researching more topics than most of the other students are going to be doing. It requires a tremendous amount of work. But I'll tell you another reason why I feel that extemp is the event that I really enjoyed coaching a lot. You don't have to be a marvelous speaker. You get a lot more forgiveness, I guess you could say, and delivery for extemp than some of the other events, because the barriers to becoming successful are so difficult, especially for an extemp. And so the point I'm trying to make here is, if you're willing to work your butt off to improve your speaking skills, and you're willing to work your butt off in preparation and understanding how to do extemp by getting knowledgeable on the topics and practicing speeches so you could speak fairly fluently, you're going to be successful. And I've had dozens of very successful extemporaneous students, and I've had hundreds of students that I've coached in extemp, and I always tell them the same thing. If you're willing to put in the time and the work, you will be successful. I can't tell them that in interpretation, I can't tell them that in oratory, and I can't tell them that in Congress, or even debate. And so, as a coach, to be able to tell a kid that if you work your butt off, you could be successful, you could be a champion, and not be, giving them a line of baloney. That's extemp.
Good line, and I, of course, love extemp, too. What do you see as the future for California forensics? Where are we going?
Expanding. Yeah, I think California forensics has been cutting edge in forensics since I've been a part of it in 1989. Okay, I've seen a tremendous growth in the state in the number of kids who participate. I've seen you look at the NFL rules. You have California Plan, okay, in there as how to run tournaments and events and that sort of thing. You look at success at nationals. Okay, a lot of those kids are coming from California, and I think that our potential for growth in this state is absolutely tremendous. I mean, look how populous the state is. There's a ton of really intelligent kids in the state. There's a ton of parents in the state, professionals who value the activity of forensics and debate. That I mean, it's limitless in the expansion of the number of students who participate, and I think that really what's going to take to get us over in the 21st century is some sort of requirement in public schools to offer and teach public speaking. Some public speaking requirement, A through G, that sort of thing for colleges. Because look at now with Common Core, right? What's so important in Common Core? The ability to analyze, right? Draw, conclude, all of the things that we teach the kids in speech and debate. Why in the world wouldn't speech and debate and public speaking be a requirement for students? At least a year. And I'm telling you, if we ever get over that step right there, California would be absolutely off the charts when it comes to speech and debate. But I've seen it grow, and I think that our potential is off the charts.
In conclusion, I always like to ask people, what did I leave out that you'd like to talk about? What about your career, your observations of forensics in general that I might not have asked you about?
Well, I mean, it's a wonderful activity, obviously. We all know that, right? But it's also a very time-consuming activity, right? And it can be an activity that really consumes us. And there's a competition element of it that you can really get the best of us sometimes. And I think that what's really, really important, especially for new coaches to understand, is to take it with moderation, right? And understanding that, winning isn't everything. And, having the most number of kids and the most number of trophies and all that sort of thing isn't everything. And especially, if it drives us in a sort of single obsession, because, I mean, it's out there in speech and debate competition that if you wanted to vote every weekend and you wanted to devote your life to the activity, you can. But, there are other people that are also important in our lives. There are other parts of life. And so we have to be careful. And I think it's with any competition that we don't get too single-minded with it. And I know I went through stretches to where, I was thinking to myself, geez, I'm just like getting too obsessed with this sort of thing. And maybe I'm putting too much time and that sort of thing into it. And so I guess going back to the earlier question of how things could change. And I think we've got to come up with some way to prevent coach burnout. Because even if you do try to be successful in the activity and not get too obsessed with it, at the same time, it's a year-long activity. It's a ton of weekends. Tournaments sometimes can run for 12 and 15 hours. And how do you recruit new coaches without burning them out? And that's got to be something that we try to do a better job of answering as an organization. You know, because it's the state and league organizations that create the schedules and do that sort of thing. And so I think we need to keep in mind, you know, what a season should look like, you know, to where we don't burn out and stress out coaches. So we are able to allow them to participate where they don't feel they have to give up their life to do it.
I thank you, David Matley, Monte Vista High School,
Thank
and
you.
Hall of Fame class of 2012.
Thank you.